Hey, you lovely lot. I hope you're listening to Crime Analyst Podcast, and in particular, the interviews with Bill Thomas and Kristen Dilley about the serial killer, Alan Wade Wilmer Sr., who has been identified in the Colonial Parkway murders. And law enforcement are trying to piece together his timeline. He was an extensive and prolific serial predator who hid in plain sight. He was a hunter and a marksman and a man who spent time on the water. And you'll see many of the pictures showing him throughout his life course. While I've been appealing for information to help with law enforcement and that timeline, and some of my incredible listeners have sent information in, and I wanted to talk about one specific case of Amber Lundgren, who was stalked, raped and murdered in 1997 in Asheville. She was 20 years old. She'd been out to a club called Barcode in Asheville, and she got separated from her friends. And sadly, at some point, she intersected with a man, and she was raped and she was murdered, and her body was found hours later in a ditch in Azalea Road, very similar to Teresa Howe. And that is a linked offence where Teresa was stalked, raped and murdered, having been at a club, the Zodiac Club, and hours later, her body was found. She had been raped and murdered. And that is one of Alan Wade Wilmer Sr.'s stranger attacks on lone females. So he was a predator. And Amber's case, well, she looks very similar to Teresa Howe. And she had defensive wounds. She had clearly fought her attacker. And an eyewitness saw a man between the hours of 3 and 4 a.m. and did give EFIT description, and you'll see that description. He is a dead ringer, this man, for Alan Wade Wilmer Sr., but that's not all. The truck that he was driving, it was a faded Navy truck, a work rig. Well, look at the truck that Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. was driving, and it had the vehicle registration EM RAW, so EM and then RAW. And it really is just uncanny. So I did put this offence into Virginia State Police, amongst others, and I'll share those with you soon. And I also recently made contact with the retired detective in Amber's case, because I wanted to just make sure that there had been a join-up, because in Amber's case there is DNA. He raped Amber, and her family are desperate for answers even now, and the detective was very, very motivated to solve this case, of course. And he assured me that he was following up on the case. So I really hope that the DNA testing is happening. And also just an appeal to people who have or were stopped by Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. or had a near miss. If you knew him, if you had contact with him, if you believe that he knocked on your vehicle on the Colonial Parkway or anywhere else, please do recontact law enforcement. These near misses are so important. Someone like Alan Wade Wilmer Sr., well, for every victim, there will be many other near misses and missed, I call them near misses, where perhaps he didn't follow through for whatever reason. Perhaps the victim or victims were non-compliant, but someone like this would be hunting all the time. It's very much fantasy-based, power and control-related crimes, and he would always be on the prowl, stalking victims. And so it's really important that we help law enforcement piece together his timeline. He is deceased. And I talked to Bill and Kristen about potentially whether he was working with another person, potentially his brother. And I talk about that. These types of, two-handed rapists, serial killer teams are incredibly rare, but they can and do happen. They are rare. And I always think about the Duffy and McCahey case, John Duffy and David McCahey, who were double-hand rapists and serial killers who had been best mates since they were little kids at school, and they operated together. So I have worked on some of these cases where it's a two-handed team. It is incredibly rare. But do take a listen to those episodes. They're really important, and it matters to the victims. It matters to their families that we keep talking about them and that we help law enforcement. So go check them out. Thank you.